Do you know that historically, there are Christians out there that claim Jesus to only be the Messiah, and not a God? Who are these Christians? What had happened to them? And why should we Muslims know about them? Islam believes that there had been many prophets sent to societies in order to establish monotheistic beliefs, which is the worship of only the one true God. But over time, after the death of that prophet, that message would eventually be corrupted. Religion is a powerful force that unites people and influences their opinions and actions. Therefore, influential people in society such as kings, politicians, businessmen, would always corrupt the message in order to fit their interests. So, it is the belief of Islam that this is unfortunately what has happened to Christianity. Roman emperors in the early church had molded the teachings of the Jewish prophet Jesus into a new creed, establishing Jesus himself to be a divine figure, whereas he himself was calling for and teaching of the worship of God alone. Historically, according to their own Christian sources, there exist a few groups of Christians who are considered to be heretical by the early church. The dominance of the doctrine of the early Roman Church had eclipsed over these small groups, and over a few centuries, they disappeared. One such particular Christian group are the Ebionites. They were a group of Jewish Christians that exists in the 1st century, up until the 4th century. We only know about their existence from the writings of the early church fathers, who did not speak kindly about them. They are mentioned by the early church fathers, like Justin Martyr, Hippolytus, Tertullian, Irenaeus, and Epiphanius. They often labeled the Ebionites as heretical Judaizers, because they were stubbornly clinging to the law of Moses, and they also rejected many of the mainstream important Christian belief. So who are the Ebionites? The name Ebionites is derived from the Hebrew word Ebionim, which means the poor or the humble. They were characterized by their strict adherence to Jewish law, unlike the other Christian groups. Why are the Ebionites important for us Muslims to know? The beliefs of the Ebionites are almost exactly what Islam believed to be the true followers of Jesus. There are many similarities between the beliefs of the Ebionites and the Muslims, such as both the Ebionites and Muslims adhere to strict monotheism, which is affirming the belief in only one God. The Ebionites also rejected the concept of the Trinity, and strongly believe in the oneness of God. Obviously, this is very different from normal Christian beliefs, but is exceedingly similar to the belief of Muslims. Both the Ebionites and Muslims rejected the idea of Jesus' divinity. They considered Jesus only as a human Messiah, and a human prophet. They even considered Jesus to be not as important as Moses, because Moses established the laws that they follow. Unlike the mainstream Christians today, the Ebionites believes in the importance of observing religious laws and commandments. They adhere to Jewish laws, while Muslims follow the Sharia law, established by Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. The Ebionites were Jewish Christians, so they strictly observed the dietary laws and restrictions of Moses. Similarly to them, we Muslims also strictly follow the dietary laws from the Quran, which is abstaining from consuming non-halal animals and drinking alcohol. Both the Ebionites and Muslims uphold the original teachings of their respective prophets, and view themselves as preserving the authentic message of God. So why are the Ebionites hated and considered to be heretics by the early church fathers? The Ebionites believed that Jesus was the Messiah and a prophet, but they did not consider him to be divine. They rejected the concept of the virgin birth and believed that Jesus was a human being. Although we Muslims believe in the virgin birth, as stated clearly in the Quran, it is understandable that the Ebionites may not believe in the virgin birth, since they are not able to verify this miracle, as they only had stories of this particular event. They also rejected the idea of Jesus' atoning sacrifice, emphasizing instead the importance of following Jewish law and performing good works for salvation. This is considered to be heresy by the Christians, even until today. The Ebionites even had their own version of the Gospel of Matthew, known as the Gospel of the Ebionites, which has not survived in its original form, but is known through quotations and references in the writings of early Christian authors. They also rejected the writings of Paul, considering him an apostate from the true teachings of Jesus. So what had happened to the Ebionites? Sadly, the Ebionites slowly decline and disappears as a distinct religious community. This is because the beliefs and practices of the Ebionites is very different from the evolving doctrines of mainstream Christianity. At the time, the early Christian movement were in the process of consolidating and establishing their orthodox beliefs, so the Ebionites who were stubbornly sticking to the laws and refused to adhere to the church were labeled as heretical. So, they faced many opposition from influential figures within the church. They were criticized for their rejection of their central Christian doctrines, such as the divinity of Jesus, the concept of Trinity, and the concept of the virgin birth. And since the Ebionites were the poor ones, they certainly cannot compete with the powerful and influential church. During the 1st century, both the Roman authorities and certain Jewish factions exerted pressure on the early Christian groups. The Ebionites, being a Jewish Christian sect, seems to have faced challenges from both sides. Roman persecution and Jewish opposition to early Christian communities have contributed to the decline of the Ebionites, although specific historical details are limited. Over time, as Christianity continued to spread and evolved, many diverse Christian communities, including the Ebionites, faced assimilation into the broader Christian framework. The influence of Greek philosophy, the growing emphasis on a unified orthodoxy, and the rise of institutionalized Christianity had resulted in marginalizing other alternative interpretations of the Christian faith. Sadly, it seems that the Ebionites may have gradually integrated into the mainstream Christianity over time, or had merged with other Christian groups, losing the distinct identity in the process. The scarcity of surviving Ebionite writings, and limited historical documentation, makes it difficult to trace the decline with certainty. The writings of their opponents, who often portrayed the Ebionites in a negative light, provide much of the available information. Without their own surviving texts, the historical record is incomplete, and the details of the decline remain very much obscure. In the end, as we all know, Pauline theology won out, because of the Roman sword, and the Jewish wars, that wiped out these Jewish Christians who were most likely the closest thing to the true belief of Jesus. It is often the case not only in history, but even theology, is written by the victors and survivors. The dead, crushed by the victors, cannot speak for themselves. Thankfully, some manuscripts survived and critical scholarship is able to shed light on it. In conclusion, the decline of the Ebionites can be attributed to factors such as opposition from mainstream Christianity, persecution by Roman and Jewish authorities, cultural assimilation, and the lack of surviving records. These factors combined over time to contribute to the eventual disappearance of the Ebionite community, as a distinct group within early Christianity. Although due to the lack of information we have on them, we could not proclaim with certainty that the Ebionites are the true followers of Jesus. It is undeniable that their existence itself, and the opposition that they received from the early church, are enough proof that Islam's claim of the corruption of Christianity is certainly not without basis. Surely, the coming of Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, later on, is in order to remedy this situation, and to return mankind towards the original message of all the prophets, which is the worship of only the one true God. If you enjoy this video, please like and subscribe to Islamika to support our efforts. Thank you.